Hello, my name is Kimberly Essie, and I am an MSW student at UNR. It's fall 2022. And me and Taylor Coons, who is also an MSW student at UNR this fall, put together a Civics and Voting 101 workshop on Friday, November 4th, in advance of the election on Tuesday, November 8th. We did this in collaboration with Upward Bound, which is where Taylor and I are interning, as well as All Voting is Local and the Bonner Leadership Program here at UNR. So this was a collaborative effort amongst multiple groups to get this workshop off the ground. The first portion of the workshop related to voting. So the first activity that we did before the start of the workshop was a voting activity where students had the opportunity to choose a topping of pizza that would, depending on who won, would be the food that all the students would need to eat. So if they chose pepperoni and that had the most votes, everyone would get pepperoni, even if they had voted for cheese, which was the other option. And pepperoni did win. We had more choices than that for pizza, but the idea behind the activity was for students to have the opportunity to vote. They didn't have to vote, but for them to know that the one that got the most votes was going to be the vote that chose what everyone would get, which is representative of midterm elections and the popular vote, which because this is not a presidential election year, was supposed to represent that the students would have the opportunity to pick the most popular choice, but everyone would have to deal with the ramifications of that vote. It was funny because when we did this vote, it was around 60% of attendees voted. And in the last, besides the election that just occurred in 2020, the percentage of the population that voted was about 2/3 of the population, which is representative of how many students voted in this particular Upward Bound election. So it was representative of the fact that only about 2/3 of the population votes. We asked what students thought about why voting is important, if it's important to them, why is it, if it's not, why not, and what do students know about voting so far, considering that most of our students are under 18. We did have one student in attendance who is 18, and then we also had a student who was 18 days away from being 18, so they were not able to vote in this election. But the idea behind it is just really to see the engagement of students and why they voted and why they didn't. And regardless of which one wins, we still have both options. We get a choice. And when we vote, we get to share that voice. So that was really the takeaway for this activity. We talked about what politicians listen to, money and votes, and that in a roundabout way, it's money can help people decide what they're going to vote for. So politicians tend to listen to who is going to give them money for their political campaigns so they can get more votes. And it also, at a federal level, once, let's say, a politician is voted in, at a federal level, they may choose to vote for or against different legislation depending on money that is backing them to make those decisions. So money is important, but so is votes. And votes are what all of us have. We each have a vote. That's the beauty of it, is regardless of how much money we have, we each have a vote. And our vote is really valuable to politicians. Voting impacts key decisions on quality of life for you, your family, and community, your voice, your tax money, opportunities for change, and your power. So one of the things that we covered in our workshop was what things you can do to make change with a vote. So we talked about these in depth, why our voice matters, what key decisions a politician might be making. So in this most recent election, we had decisions about the Constitution in Nevada, including the minimum wage and if that would be part of the Constitution, equality written into the Constitution for different groups of people. So there are real impacts on people within our community that we vote on. And I wanted to, and Taylor and I both wanted to kind of make sure that students knew that their vote does matter when they're able to vote, because it does impact their own families, their own friends, themselves and their communities. Their voice is impactful. The way they vote can affect where their tax money goes. That upward bound is in fact funded by taxpayer dollars and is a federally funded program. So it is important that the people we vote for on a local and state level, that we know what they care about, because that's going to impact where our tax money goes. They can impact what goes on a ballot. There are opportunities for change as part of civic engagement and community action, and that when they vote, they are exercising their power. We went over a population of voting turnout by age and talked about how historically the 18 to 29 age group votes least, and as you get into higher age groups, they tend to vote more. And this shows over time, midterm and primary, or I should say midterm and presidential election years, we always have less people during midterms. We'll see what happened this election cycle, this 2022 election year. We asked students to stop and think about why politicians would choose to focus on certain things rather than others, depending on the age of voters. So if older voters tend to vote more, potentially politicians will be interested in looking at causes that those people care about. We talked about who's eligible to vote in Nevada. We wanted to make sure our students knew who's eligible, including being a US citizen, being 18 years old by election day, having lived in their county in Nevada for 30 days, and the local precinct they're in for 10 days, and have a Nevada ID to register. We talked about common misunderstandings about voting, such as if you don't speak English, you can't vote. That's false. If you have a felony in Nevada, you can't vote. That's also false. You can vote if you have a felony in Nevada. If you have if you had a felony and are now released from prison, you are immediately able to vote, but you need to make sure that you're registered. So you want to check your registration. If you have a disability, you may not have access to vote in person. That's false. And if you have to show an ID when you vote in Nevada, and that's also false, unless you've never registered and you're registering on election day, or you have registered online or by mail and didn't present an ID. So we wanted to make sure those fallacies were not proliferated. And there are very simple requirements you need to meet to vote. But you cannot get in trouble for voting if you are eligible to do so. And that includes voting rights restoration, which is simply that once you have if you've committed a felony and you are released from prison, you are immediately able to vote in Nevada. And that's not the case in other states. So that's really something wonderful about Nevada. So we talked about who might be spreading misinformation to scare people away from the polls, because you want to make sure that you know your rights as a voter. And we provided some voter registration deadlines for this election cycle and ways you can vote, including acceptable forms of ID, such as a Nevada ID card, driver's license, or tribal ID card. And we just wanted people to know that if their address on their ID is correct, there's no additional proof required to vote, but if the address is different, then they need to provide some sort of confirmation of their address so that they have proof of address when they vote. And here were a couple other things that we presented as far as registration things to know. This is relating to when you register to vote, depending on the date, if you would be able to have a mail-in ballot or if you would be able to have to vote in person. And we did pass out a sample ballot so that students could see what that looked like. And we answered some frequently asked questions, such as how to vote in a different language. Spanish ballots are mailed with English ballots, so that would not be a concern. But other languages, you would have the right to bring someone with you to the polls who can help you in that language, so long as they are not an employer and so long as they are not a union representative. There are also poll workers that may have knowledge of your language that might be at the polls that can help direct you of what you need to do in order to be able to vote. And if you have a disability, there are different options for you to be able to vote, but you will always have access to a voter machine if you go in person to vote. With your disability, and you do not have to disclose what your disability is. You can vote online in advance if you have a disability using the EASE or EASE system in Nevada, which would be something you would need to do in advance, but it would be receiving an absentee ballot that you can mark and return. Or you can bring a person with you to help you vote if you would like. You are always able to do that, again, so long as they're not an employer or a union representative. And we also offered some tips and tricks for researching candidates and measures before going to the polls, or just in general as students are able to become more civically engaged, and when they are able to vote and voice their vote in the next election or other elections, such as learning what's on the ballot by looking at a sample ballot, which those are mailed, so they would be able to look at those in the mail. They'd also be able to look up what is going on in their ballot by searching. Googling is a really good way to do it. Just going and saying what's on my ballot in Washoe County. There are lots of resources for finding out what's there. It's also good to look at who's promoting or opposing each measure or candidate. Uh, and you can do that by, like, a really good example would be Ballotpedia. That's a nonpartisan site that shows you where money is coming from to oppose or promote certain bills or candidates. Find organizations in your area that you care about or that you're a member of to see where they stand on certain issues. Talk to your friends about issues, talk to your family about issues. Sometimes it's good to know where other people stand who have similar opinions to you so that you can get an idea of what they think, and you can decide if that's also how you feel or if you want to do more research. And also, just don't worry too much. Vote if you can, and if you need to skip certain things because you don't know how you want to vote, that's okay. The most important thing is to go out and vote. We took questions and we provided some emails for some of the people that were part of our collaboration, including Dr. Jennifer Willett's not listed here, but she was part of this as well, and a huge part of our success in our presentation. That was our portion of it. The second portion of our workshop was led by the Bonner Leadership Group, and Matthew Little led that. It had to do with civic engagement specifically, and it talked a little bit about parties. It was very engaging. Students got to do things that were interactive, and we just really tried to shed some light on different ways the students can engage civically, community action, ways they can get involved even if they are not 18 yet. So I think that covers everything. Really appreciate your time today. Hope you learned a little bit about the civic our voting and civic engagement process in Nevada, at least for this last election. And I think that covers it. Thank you.